How do you turn this to this? Or this to this? What about this to this? In the same vein, the government has investments in various commercial activities and operations. However, not all these investments perform as expected due to mismanagement and not being able to compete on a level playing ground with other like-minded, established businesses in the private sector. The world over, governments have not been known to be good in business. Actually, government has no business being in business. Their main role should be to provide a conducive environment for businesses to thrive. The Privatization Commission is a corporate body established by the Privatization Act of 2005 to formulate, manage and implement the privatization program.
The Privatization Commission is established under an Act of Parliament of 2005, and this came about because the government wanted a clear way on how to share out public entities with the private sector.
And so this organization has been involved in this even before the 2008, when it came into commercial activity into private hands to enhance their productivity and efficiency. And so this is what this institution is doing, just to make sure that the entities that we have are able to maximize their potential. And you see, government's responsibility is normally to create an environment that is conducive for doing business. And that being the case, it cannot be able to compete with private sector in doing that which can be done better by the private sector.
Privatization was done back in 2007. It was an effort. It was actually in that wave of government wanting to get away from business. Several state corporations were privatized. For the case of Kenya, we were privatized partially, 40%.
Since 2008, the Commission has set out to enhance Kenya's productive capacity through the implementation of the approved privatization program. The privatization program is a list of public sector assets and operations approved by the Cabinet to be considered for privatization and subsequently privatized once the approval process is completed.
So far, since this organization was started, we cannot say that it has carried out a complete process. It has done partially what used to be QA, where it did it partially through selling to an entity called Distal. But other than that, we have had more than 26 entities that have been earmarked for privatization, and they range all the way from the hospitality industry, that's the hotel industry, the sugar cane sector, that is the agricultural industry, the banking sector. When we talk of agriculture, we can also talk of the livestock industry. So there has been quite a range of sectors that the government has earmarked, and it's a continuous process.
One of the biggest benefits is now a more efficient way of working, less bureaucratic, faster decision making by management. And I think the involvement of employees in the organization, the engagement levels, I would say are much higher than they were before. Employees today are involved at different decision points within the organization, and I think that level of engagement was not seen before, because at that time we tended to make decisions only at a management level.
We are one of the first organizations we privatized in the 80s. And what we saw is that the business then moved into private hands, partially, not wholesomely 100%, but at 20% sell down. That was sold over years. The bank was able to raise much more capital. And although we were a large bank actually at that time, but we've gone ahead to grow 20, 30, 40 times from the 80s. So I would say it's been one of the success stories today. And that could not have happened if it was not very well midwifed by the privatization team in our country.
The Privatization Act defines the process to be undertaken before an entity gets privatized. The process cannot be arbitrary. So, how does it work?
One of the things that we do is, once we've identified an entity that conducts commercial activities, we do a justification as a commission, because that is what the Act mandates us to do. Once we've done the justification, we send it to the National Treasury, which is our parent ministry and the owner of all entities within Kenya as by law. And they will look at the justification, and if they are satisfied that the privatization of that particular entity is going to make national interest in terms of one, enhancing its productivity and being able to see revival, so that then it can create employment opportunities, it can be able to contribute towards the economy by way of taxes, then they do a cap memo to go to the cabinet, where then cabinet will look at it, look at the merits, and if they are satisfied, then approval is granted. Then after that, we do a gazettement. Now, it is once this has been gazetted, then it forms what we call a privatization program, which then lists entities. Then once that has been done, then as an institution, because of the nature of the technical way about privatizations, then we engage transaction advisors. Reason being that as an institution, we cannot be in a position to engage all the talents and the skills that we would require because of the different types of privatizations. You will have manufacturing enterprises, you will have hotels, you will have agri-related things, and so you cannot, as an institution, be able to bring all these skills together. And therefore, we outsource transaction advisory services. So these people will come and have a look at these enterprises by doing due diligence. Now, the due diligences would involve legal, financial, and even technical due diligence about the businesses. And then they will do a report, which will be looked at and appraised by a steering committee, which is a creation of the Act. And the steering committee will look at the options that are being provided by this transaction advisor, and then the same is recommended to the commission, which is the board. And then the same again goes through the same process, National Treasury, Cabinet, and ultimately after Cabinet has looked at what we call a detailed proposal, giving us options of how privatization can take place. And the same is taken to National Assembly, who then, being the custodians of the interest of the people, then they are the ones who will grant approval. And then our responsibility after that approval is to go through what we call implementation of the privatization as already approved by Cabinet and the National Assembly. And then this is where now we would invite any interested parties who would want to take a stake in any of these businesses to come in and express interest. And then of course we do an evaluation, and ultimately the handover process takes place.
It has been very, very useful because you see, like I've already pointed out, we comply to very many acts as a result of being listed, although we were required to comply to some before. For example, I mentioned the CMA regulations. They are very rigorous. We have to comply to all of them. The Nairobi Security Exchange also, by virtue of being listed, we have compliance issues to fulfill there. We have the regulations coming from the Insurance Regulatory Authority. The Companies Act, the new one, the revised one, actually has very, very high thresholds in terms of performance of a company and in terms of issues of ethics.
In terms of the benefits, we have seen them come through since the privatization. We have doubled our volume output, and we have actually significantly improved our bottom line.
When you privatize, it's not automatic that you get the governance you need. There must be clear process, the bank must be able to have the systems and benchmark, and you must be committed with the cost. It's a very deliberate journey you must run. So, and I'm glad to say that in that journey over the last 30, 40 years, the bank has been able to achieve a strong momentum and also respected corporate governance guidelines as set out. And obviously over time, it's now much easier because the capital markets has also now issued what you call corporate governance guidelines that listed entities, whether they're banks or not, must comply with on an annual basis.
The process is streamlined and anchored in the Privatization Act to ensure transparency.
One of the biggest challenges, of course, that we will face is that because of the diverse nature of the various public entities that you are engaged in privatizing, we may not have internal basic capacity to do that. The second one is that, change is not an easy thing that people accept. So sometimes you'll find the element of public participation may not really be on the issues that need to be discussed. Sometimes the public is completely off the cuff on what really needs to be discussed.
The Commission has put in place structures to ensure the privatization process is carried out as indicated in the law. Given the unique mandate of the Commission in its quest to improve Kenya's productive capacity, the Commission's role is therefore important to the country's economy directly and indirectly.
For me, the future of privatization is what needs to be part and parcel of government agenda. That as much as possible, unless in situations where we talk about strategic national interest entities that probably may be doing a bit of commercial, but then we need to minimize the government involvement in that commercial activity into just ensuring that we safeguard certain national interest agenda.
I think the future of privatization in Kenya is the way to go, and that's where we can unlock a lot of potential in terms of productivity, because you will find that there was an era in the 60s and 70s where nationalization, government creating that conducive environment to invest in certain areas, that was the trend. But now you find that with liberalization, with opening up of the country, you need to unlock that entrepreneurial spirit that is there in the private sector.
The growth we make goes in the hands of ordinary Kenyans. That's important. They will pay their school fees, build their homes, buy their own businesses, and continue to grow their enterprises. That's the value of privatization. And I don't think there's any other way in reality to create that wealth unless you privatize an enterprise where government has ownership.
We've seen the success of the first stage of privatization, and we are looking forward into the second phase of privatization. And with the smooth transition that we had in the first, we are hopeful that the second phase will just be as successful.